Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of a certain person who would be involved in something. The reason that I'm so vague right now is because it's going to be a different format or a semi-different format. I've done it once before. You've liked it a lot. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll that nice jig of an intro. Jig of an intro. I'm sorry in advance. But on a not humorous part, this has to do with a criminal, just so you are aware. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play some clips from the footage of interviews with this person, and we're going to watch the entire thing, get an idea as how it feels, and you comment what you feel stuck out to you. What are some oddities that you see in nonverbal communication or in verbal communication, anything that you see that would be engaging or would raise any questions, then you comment them in the sections below, and then after we go through that entire video, then we'll go through the analysis itself. This kind of gives you an opportunity to be able to walk into some footage and practice some of the things that you have seen on the channel before. We did that with the Philpott video a while ago, and I think it went pretty well, and it seemed to track pretty well with you, so I'm going to go ahead and do that again today. But that's enough of the talking about the actual video. Let's sit down and watch this entire video all the way through together, and then we'll talk about it after that. Sound good? I mean, it has to sound good. There's nothing that you could really say that will change what I'm about to do, so I'm glad it sounds good. Actually, and just before we dive into this, I want to be able to offer some disclaimers. One, this has been compiled throughout multiple different news stations with multiple different clips, and there's obviously some video quality and audio quality difficulties because these selections of clips are usually pretty old. So quality is pretty bad, audio is pretty bad, but it's the best that we could find, and it's the earliest on that I could find, so hopefully this is the most raw and realistic that we're going to get from this person. Along with that, what this person is going to be saying in their video is intense, so just be aware before continuing. This is dealing with the crime. Just keep that in mind. Also, even if you know who this is, do not comment, oh, I know what this is, blah, 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 and offer spoilers for everybody. This is hopefully going to be able to be a learning experience. That's all the disclaimers that I can actually give. So let's go ahead and dive in.
We were just out, I guess, sightseeing, I guess you'd say. And the kids got tired. They fell asleep in the car, so I decided to just head on home. But I saw a road I hadn't been on before. We like to take back roads. And just went down that road, and there was a guy standing in the road, flagging me down, so I stopped. Everything was done in a matter of 5 or 10 seconds. He swung himself around and fired twice. One caught me in the arm, the other one I went off somewhere. Danny cried the whole way. I could hear him softly just moaning, and Christie was dying. God, all the blood, all the pain. I kept trying to roll over so she wouldn't choke on the blood, and it didn't dawn on me at the time that the blood was coming from her lungs. And as I say, she may be the only one to get me out of this. Would I have brought her to the hospital? Wouldn't she be the one that I would make sure is dead? There are too many holes in it. If I had shot my own children, would I not have done a good job of it? Why would I have taken my kids to the hospital? Wouldn't I have made sure they were dead and then cried crocodile tears? That's insane to think that I would do such a thing and then bring the witnesses in against myself. That's crazy. I'm here just to appeal for people out there, to, if they know anything, to call in. Anything to help out and find the guy that shot my kids. Somebody took her, but we have to get better. This man shot my daughter. My first reaction was to snap back to my childhood, to the pain that had happened to me back then, my marriage, my entrapment by society. This man was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He had more power because he had a gun. And I stood there and I looked at Christie reaching, and the blood that just kept gushing out of her mouth. What do you do? The gun kept firing and firing and firing, and it was monotonous. It just kept going. It was like a slow motion picture. When he swung around, he was pointing, when he swung around, it hit the tips of my fingers. The gun hit the tips of my fingers, and that snapped me. And I went, wait a minute. I'm not trapped by society. I don't care if he is bigger. If I stand here and I say, Yeah, here, take the keys. I mean, there's nothing I can do. You win because you have the gun. My kids are gonna die. And I'm not gonna let my kids die. And so instead of giving him the keys, I feigned throwing the keys. He did not take time to point the gun and shoot me, obviously, because he would have shot me the same way he did the kids. When he was swinging in the direction of the keys, firing the gun, he hit my arm. Everybody says, you sure were lucky. Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful. The scar is going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky. If I had been shot the way they were, we all would have died.
The blood splatters on the outside of the car showing Downs shot Cheryl outside of the car.
We saw pictures of this so-called spatter. It's drops. When they took the kids, they took Chris and Cher out of the driver's side of the car, and it's blood droplets. What do I see most is blood coming out of Christie's mouth, because that's what I see. I can't see Danny, and I can't see Cher. Sherry was laying on the floor. Danny is just crying real soft. So that sound stays in my mind. When I go to bed, I cry at night. And even now, I still cry. I dream about Cheryl. But at night, when I close my eyes, I can see Christie reaching her hand out to me while I'm driving. And the blood just keep coming out of her mouth. And that, maybe it'll fade too with time, but I don't think so. That haunts me the most.
But what of Downs' fourth child, the baby about to be born?
I'd like to see him try to take this baby from me. And how? I got pregnant because I miss Christie, and I miss Danny, and I miss Cheryl so much. I'm never going to see Cheryl on earth again. And you can't replace children, but you can replace the effect that they give you. And they give me love, they give me satisfaction, they give me stability, they give me a reason to live and a reason to be happy, and that's gone. They took it from me. But children are so easy to conceive.
Okay, so that is the entire selection of footage that we're going to be able to work with here. There's 2 different interviews from 2 different times, but they're both very early on, as you can see, like I mentioned before. So let me know what you think. What stuck out to you as odd in this person's nonverbal communication? While you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick background as to who this is and kind of what led up to these moments here, and then we'll go through our analysis. So go ahead and let me know in the comments below. So this person is Elizabeth Diane Downs. She was born on August 7th of 1955 and had a rather traumatic childhood. At the age of 14, she dropped her first name, Elizabeth, in order to go by the name Diane Downs. In 1973, Diane married Steve Downs, who they had been together for a while since earlier on in high school, and had their first child, Christie, a year later in 1974. Then their daughter Cheryl was born in 1976, and Stephen Daniel was born in 1979. The couple then divorced in 1980. 3 years later, Downs fatally shot her daughter and attempted to do so with her 2 other children in 1983, which some attribute this action due to the fact that her love interest at the time had said that he was uninterested in being a father to any children, so they were assuming that that could be the motive behind this. Following the crime, she told multiple different versions of a story to the police about how a man attempted to carjack her car and then shot the children, and there were multiple different versions of this story across the timeline. Very messy all the way around. She was convicted in 1984 and sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years. Then in 1987, Downs escaped for a very short time, but was found and re-imprisoned. She was denied parole in December of 2008 and again in December of 2010, and her next hearing is set to be sometime in 2021. So yeah, that is Diane Downs. That's what she has done, and that's why she is serving time in prison. Now, one of the more notable aspects of her interviews is her emotive state. It's very intriguing. It was for the people then, it is for us now, and I think that's why many people have requested that I take a look at her case. So that's enough talking, that's enough background. Let's actually go through and you can compare what you found in your analysis to what I find in mine, and we will be able to go from there.
We were just out, I guess, sightseeing, I guess you'd say. And the kids got tired. They fell asleep in the car. So I decided to just head.
Okay, interesting notes here. She has a very flat, almost bored or hooded expression. Her eyes are hooded, if that makes sense. She looks bored, maybe tired, uninterested, and detached. And so this is something that actually has popped up regularly throughout all of the videos in her baseline. Now, this is where it gets interesting because for her, this could be considered part of her baseline. She has rather unemotive eyes. They stay at this level most of the time. And that is interesting, and that is something that we're noting for her baseline. There are some areas that I'll talk about the eyes and the upper half of her face later on and how it does still stray from that baseline in a unique way, but it is something we're making note of. Let's continue.
On home. But I saw a road I hadn't been on before. We like to take back roads. And just went down that road. And there was a...
So she does that flutter blink when she's mentioning back roads. We like to take back roads, and she does that fluttering blink. There's psychological processing somewhere around there. There's something that she could say in addition to that, but she's not holding something back. These are all ways that you can look at that. Regardless, that fluttering of a blink around that mention of the back roads, something happened there. That's what we would be able to understand from her nonverbal communication.
Guy standing in the road, flagging me down, so I stopped. Everything was done in a matter of fact.
Flagging me down, she has a little micro movement of the head no. This could be related to either the negative emotions of the instance itself, or it could be a desynchronization point where she is showing non-verbally, subconsciously, that she doesn't agree with what she's saying, and it's coming out in the no shake. Which I've mentioned this before in other videos, and I'll continue to do so because it's important. Culturally, there are different nonverbal tells. In the American culture, a left to right shake like that means no, and an up and down means yes, so that would be ingrained in her because she grew up in that culture. This isn't the case for everyone across the world, and even in America, there can be some different variants to that, but for the most part, that is the culturally accepted norm, that this is yes and this is no. So when we see that micro movement no, that would be her subconscious showing us, possibly, that she doesn't agree with what she's saying. Let's keep watching.
5 or 10 seconds. He swung himself around and fired twice. One caught me in the arm, the other one I went off somewhere.
So she's showing some aggression tells, and meanwhile her eyes are staying fairly unemotive, but her head positioning has changed, and the movements of her head have changed as well. Along with that, her tone has also altered. So she's doing a little bit more of the brow lowering style of head movements. This is an aggression gesture when you see somebody talking at you like this and they're talking directly like down the barrel of the lens would be a way for me to say it, or directly into your eyes. It's a very confrontational look. So there's something that she's really aggressively trying to convey here. Perhaps she knows that she's under suspicion for what is going on. Perhaps she is upset because they've asked these questions before. We're not exactly certain, but she is aggressive in this recollection, which isn't common during these sorts of interviews, but just because it's not common doesn't mean that she's being a liar. Let's continue watching.
Danny cried the whole way. I could hear him softly just moaning, and Christie was dying.
So, as you can see, this is an upsetting display non-verbally. She's recalling the state of her children after this act, and when it gets to Christie, she has a very long blink. That indicates that there's something special about Christie to us. Had we just walked into this situation, we don't know the backstory, know nothing about it, there's something special about Christie. That spike in her nonverbal communication lets us know that. We would want to ask if she hadn't already told us. I believe at this point she had told that maybe the guy had fatally shot her or had shot her, something interesting. But we do know that there's something happening here. Let's see what that is.
God, all the blood, all the pain. I kept trying to roll over.
Okay, so something that I'll note, non-verbally speaking. She's speaking about all the blood and all the pain. So you can hear that affecting her voice. A little bit of emotion could be seen as creeping in there. But what's difficult for us is that that emotion is not reflected non-verbally for her. It's not reflecting in her eyes. It's not reflecting in her mouth. It's not reflecting in any of the channels that I can see, even psychophysiologically, which those are impossible to control responses to stressors, even psychophysiologically, we haven't heard any changes in her breathing, except for the tonal changes. Tonal changes are extremely easy to control. You can immediately sound like you're having a difficult time with something, or increase your pitch or lower your pitch, or anything along those lines, you can do that. But as far as her breathing goes, her blink rate, there's not a way that we can really see her heart rate or blood pressure because of the quality of the film, and we're not there. But from what we can observe, there have been no changes despite the obvious change in her tone. This desynchronization is something that many people have picked up on, and rightfully so, and the people then also picked up on it. Let's continue building this nonverbal character sketch of Diane.
So she wouldn't choke on the blood, and it didn't dawn on me at the time that the blood was coming from her lungs. And as I say, she may be the only one to get me out of this. Would I have brought her to the hospital? Wouldn't she be the one that I would make sure?
So, it's interesting. Something that characterizes Diane's recollections or recounting of the events of that night are some fairly gruesome details. Now, it's interesting that while she is recollecting these details, she's making steady and hard eye contact with whoever she is speaking to. It's almost as if she's looking at them expecting something. She seems to be studying them while she says that. This calculated expression in her face means that she's looking for an emotive response from the people that she's speaking to. It feels as if she wants to unsettle them with the details of the crime. This is an interesting characteristic in and of itself. If she were innocent in this situation, then why is she going through such efforts to include such gruesome details and to look for and expect an emotional response from the interviewer? Why is that the case from somebody who is innocent? What is it that they could possibly want from that? Well, if she's innocent, not really sure. It's difficult. Maybe she wants sympathy, could be a way of looking at it if she is innocent. But then there are better ways to garnish sympathy than to include some of the more brutal details of the crime. If she's guilty, and she did this, then that raises another question. Why is she adding them in this realm? Why could she possibly see fit to add these details in if she's guilty? And it is not unheard of for murderers to want responses from people about it. They want recognition for what they have done. So her listing these details, these very gruesome details, and looking for a response would fall in line with that. She wants the recognition. We'll talk a little bit about her psychology after the analysis and how everything kind of plays together, but let's get back to the analysis itself.
Sure is dead. There are too many holes in it. If I had shot my own children, would I not have done a good job of it? Why would I have taken my kids to the hospital? Wouldn't I have made sure they were dead and then cried crocodile tears?
A lot of aggression here again. This is probably because the question was asked, did you do the crime yourself? Did you do this? And so she's aggressively responding. You could see the anger in her eyebrows, the lowering of her head in that confrontational way that I did before. And even with her words, they're very tight-lipped. She's not relaxed while saying this. She is ready for a verbal confrontation here. She's in full fight mode and ready to go. That is what her nonverbal communication is telling us. Let's see what else it says.
That's insane to think that I would do such a thing and then bring the witnesses in against myself. That's crazy. I'm here.
So she has that's crazy and looks away, but that's a pretty substantial no shake in there. We couldn't really accurately say that that's a desynchronization point of them being like, that's crazy. So that would just be more her conscious head movement of saying that's crazy, negative thing, craziness, blah, blah, blah. I hope that makes sense. Long story short, that part's synchronized. It's not like she's subconsciously saying, no, that's not that crazy, or at least not according to her nonverbal communication. Let's see.
Just to appeal for people out there, to, if they know anything, to call in. Anything to help out and find the guy that shot my kids. Somebody took her, but we have to get better.
Okay, so that's the end of the first little segment of interview that I could find. As you can see, she has some oddities in her nonverbal communication. She already has some points of possible desynchronization. She has some anomalies nonverbally as well, and all of those have been considered as red flags. We're keeping them in mind as we continue forward with the rest of this so that we can figure out as best as we can based off of this one YouTube video, figure out how we feel about her nonverbally. Let's keep watching.
This man shot my daughter. My first reaction was to snap back, to to my childhood, to the pain that had happened to me back then.
So this is interesting. And this has some psychological plans, which, just so you know, I am not a psychologist. I'm a nonverbal analyst. I have some understanding of psychology to be able to aid that. But I am not a psychologist, so I'm in no way diagnosing or anything along those lines. Everything that I'm stating about her psychology has been said by other experts who are in the field and have done the diagnosing. But in this area, she says that she snaps back to her childhood, and then she has a small micro smile on the bottom half of her face. It's hard to say whether or not it's a contempt smile or a genuine smile, and there's a couple different options for that. If it's a contempt smile, this could be in relation to her having moral or intellectual superiority to whoever she's speaking to, which maybe means that she is feeling like she's aloof to this situation, perhaps. If it's not, it could also be duping delight, which is when a person is trying to lie to somebody and they feel like they're getting away with it. A small smile will slip out onto their face because it's a giddy feeling that they get, the ability to pull the wool over somebody else's eyes and get away with a lie. There's also that possibility. The other possibility, along with the other two, is that she has fond memories of her childhood, and that's where that's coming from, but then the words that she's about to say after that are the pain that she experienced in her childhood, so that doesn't make as much sense. Last but not least, that smile could mean that she is just coping with the negative emotions centered around trauma. Many people will smile or laugh in inappropriate situations because it's their coping mechanism with trauma. Many people don't even intend to do the smiling or the laughing. It comes automatically to them. It's popped up again and again and again, and it will continue to do so, and it's a possibility there. In context with everything else, that might not make as much sense, nor does the happy memories of the childhood, so we're looking at the first two options as possible reasons for that smile. Let's continue on.
Marriage, my entrapment by society. This man was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He had more power because he had a gun. And
This is an odd storyline that she's giving, that she's pulling in these other aspects of life, contemporary life at that time, into her narrative. And her tone has changed as well. She's no longer at the softer tone that she normally is at. She's at more of this, like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, like speakery tone, public speaking tone, perhaps. Like something along those lines. She's like trying to be a motivational speaker or something like that. It's very strange. Her tone has shifted, so there's something that has a layer of fakeness on top of this part. Why? Why would this have shifted this way? Obviously we know because this is a lie right now, but if we were in this brand new, that would be my question, is why has your tone shifted in this weird additional information that you've brought out? Very weird, right? Let's keep watching.
I stood there and I looked at Christie reaching, and the blood that just kept gushing out of her mouth.
All right, so now we have two instances with Diane smiling in relation to traumatic events. We had it in her childhood. We've had it here as well. There's something centered around the traumatic events that's causing her to smile. Is this her coping mechanism? Well, if she were innocent, this could be seen as a coping mechanism, like I said, like I mentioned before. It could just be her innocent reaction to the traumatic event. Possibly. In this case, we know it's not. If we had walked into this with a clean slate, not knowing any idea about who she was or what evidence there was, so on and so forth, then it would still be suspicious. She's smiling at times of trauma. We would have to just want to push there, ask more questions. Don't say, oh, she's obviously guilty. That's not acceptable either. You have to ask to get to the point of finding out what the truth is. I hope that makes sense. Let's keep watching.
What do you do? The gun kept firing and firing and firing, and it was monotonous. It just kept going.
Interesting. She intentionally lists it as the gun kept firing and firing and firing. And this verbal distancing is interesting for either side. If she were innocent, that separation between the gun firing and the person firing doesn't make as much sense. Why would she not say the man kept firing the gun and firing and firing and firing and putting it on the guilt of the man who did the terrible act? That seems as though it would make more sense in a person's mind. Maybe not in her mind. If she were innocent and this were a unique situation, maybe not in her mind. But it is interesting that she includes that distancing. Now, if she were/is guilty, then that makes a lot more sense. That distancing between her and the firearm would make her feel more psychologically comfortable with what she had done. It wasn't her pulling the trigger, the gun was firing and firing and firing, blah, blah, blah. I hope that makes sense to you, that interesting verbal distancing. You could see that pop up in different ways throughout many different conversations. When you see a person try to distance themselves from a thing being done verbally, it could be an indicator that they might have something to add to that conversation that they're not sharing. Let's keep watching.
It was like a slow motion picture. When he swung around, he was pointing, when he swung around, it hit the tips of my fingers. The gun hit the tips.
So I want to make note, what you can see here on the screen is that's her on the left and a person that they were reenacting the night of on the right. This was a very disturbing thing to watch. You can find it on the internet. She is giddy, giggling, laughing, making jokes, cracking jokes, all the way throughout this entire reenactment of supposedly the night that somebody tried to kill her kids and her and take their car. And so that odd emotional disconnect there is another anomaly. But you don't get to be privy to that because we're not watching that footage, but it is still in there. And that emotional disconnect is one of the most common strains throughout all of Diane's entire narrative, is that severe emotional disconnect. Very interesting. Let's continue watching this analysis though.
My fingers, and that snapped me, and I went, wait a minute. I'm not trapped by society. I don't.
That's not what she went like. That's not non-verbally, just so you know, but I guarantee you that she wasn't. I guarantee you that if this happened the way that she's painting it out to do, she didn't get flagged down by an assailant with a gun, and while he's threatening her with the gun, feeling like, we live in a society, and then when the gun hits her fingers because he's been shooting her kids and he's whipping around, and when it hits her fingertips, she's like, wait, I'm not part of a society, and then she goes into action? No. I'm sorry. Absolutely not. In times of severe trauma and stress, the brain, unless it's trained to cope with severe trauma and stress again and again and again, it will go into fight, flight, or freeze mode to the very base operating. And your goal then is to survive. You don't have these complex processing about the state of sociological, interrelational, blah, blah, blah. You don't. You just don't. So when she's trying to say this, I don't buy it. I don't know why she thought that anybody would buy that. Very interesting. But at the time, it would simply be another red flag, another suspicious tick on her rather long belt of suspicious ticks at this point. Let's keep watching.
I don't care if he is bigger. If I stand here and I say, yeah, here, take the keys. I mean, there's nothing I can do. You win because you have the gun. My kids are going to die. And I'm not going to let my kids die. And so instead of giving him the keys, I feigned throwing the keys. He did not.
That would seem more realistic. That level of thinking, like, I don't want my children to die, so I'm going to try to get this guy out of here. That's more of a realistic form of thinking in that sort of situation. Still rather collected, but more realistic. It's not this heady, I've got to think of the state of our society and everything around that to be able to affect this instance. That doesn't make as much sense. So, just an interesting thing verbally. Let's keep watching.
Take time to point the gun and shoot me, obviously, because he would have shot me the same way he did the kids. When he was swinging in the direction of the keys, firing the gun, he hit my arm. Everybody says, you sure were lucky.
So that's an interesting thing. That's her explanation for her being shot only in the arm, where her children were shot in the torso and the chest very cleanly and easily. And she's saying that he obviously didn't aim at her because he was turning to catch the keys or something, to look at the keys where she was throwing them and accidentally pulled the trigger, hitting her arm. That's her excuse. I mean, it's not unlikely. That could tentatively happen. If any of you have ever fired a firearm and you're not practicing safe firearm etiquette, then if you keep your finger on the trigger, it's easy to accidentally pull. Possibly possibly, still more unlikely than the real actual narrative, but it is a possibility. That's just her way of writing off details.
Well, I don't feel very lucky. I couldn't tie my damn shoes for about 2 months. It is very painful. It is still painful. The scar.
You see her emotional state shift harsh throughout this, to where she's recollecting this feeling that she's having, and she has a laughing period in there, she has an upset period in there, she has a almost, I don't know, outraged or surprised period in there, then it hard cuts to a more somber period in there, and all of those happen very jolted in very short, abbreviated areas. It doesn't feel natural because it really isn't, but what she's, I'm assuming, trying to do here, which she also was trying to do in earlier areas, is garner more attention for herself. She wants to emotionally get displays from the interviewer to be able to have more attention to herself. So as you can see, the interviewer is holding very still and keeping a relatively blank expression, if a little concerned would be a way of putting that. But Diane is trying to get her to emote to the responses that she's giving. So she's trying on the different emotional styles until she lands on one that maybe might fit. And so that's what we can see here. That's not necessarily what's going on, but it is something that is tendent in people who desire attention in a very, very extreme level. They will manipulate their way to get it. I hope that makes sense. Let's keep watching and we'll talk later.
It's going to be there forever. I'm going to remember that night for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. I don't think I was very lucky. I think my kids were lucky. If I had been shot the way they were, we all would have died.
Such a gross mindset. Everything was gross about that line there. And that is a really revealing aspect of Diane's personality type, that she, if you've noticed, this entire time, it's almost all been about her. I, very little mention of her children, and it's showing where her focus is on. And then she also says that I don't feel like I was lucky because I'm alive. I feel like they were lucky because they were shot. Like, that's wrong. I'm sorry, that's very incorrect. And like I said, very revealing as to what Diane's mindset is. We'll talk about that psychological side after the analysis.
Blood splatters on the outside of the car showing Downs shot Cheryl outside of the car.
We saw pictures of this so-called spatter. It's drops. When they took the kids, they took Christie.
So we can see she has a smile of contempt on her face, and it's in regards to the spatter and blah, blah, blah. All that, focusing on the contempt smile, like I've mentioned, that is intellectual or moral superiority. So when she's feeling that, our question is, what is that in relation to? Is that because she sees that evidence as weak and she's innocent and she thinks that she's above it? That's probably what she wants to convey. Or is it because she's guilty and she feels like she's able to outsmart the police, and it's coming out in the smile of contempt? More likely, aka that is almost guaranteed what it is in this instance because we know the answer already, but at that point we would still have to make a note of it and continue on.
Share out of the driver's side of the car, and it's blood droplets. What do I see most is blood.
Keep in mind, she's talking about blood droplets from her daughter being murdered, and she still has this smile, this inappropriate smile. Very interesting. It is very interesting, and you know the reasons that it could be, but it's still very interesting that it pops up again and again.
Blood coming out of Christie's mouth, because that's what I see. I can't see Danny, and I can't see Cher. Sherry was laying on the floor. Danny is just crying real soft. So
That's odd. She's talking about her recollection, what sticks out to her most, and what sticks out to her most in her recollection here is one of the more gruesome scenes that she has been happy to tell again and again and again to people so that she can get the emotional response out of that. But then she says, I don't know where the other kids were, and then she starts describing where the other kids were. Just interesting. It's a little inconsistency in her verbal patterning, but not a big deal then. It could easily have been chalked up to anxiety or agitation or nerves or anything along those lines. That's not the feeling that we're getting from her emotionally, because that's not the emotional display that she's having, but that's just your explanation. Let's keep watching.
So that sound stays in my mind. When I go to bed, I cry at night. Even now, I still cry. I dream about Cheryl. But at night, when
Interesting. And this one's difficult to say. So when she says, when I go to bed, I cry at night, and she is moving her head, no. It is big enough that it could be an intentional move, but she also is coupling it with a smile and a confrontational tilt of the head. So the smile and the confrontational tilt counteract that idea that maybe it's a conscious movement of the head. Some people just move their head. It's possible. But those other two make it to where it's less likely, and that means that the negative no shake, the no I did not, could be an indicator of desynchronization. Chances are, based off of her body language in this area, I would trust the two that say that she doesn't cry at night, rather than the one that says that she might. I hope that makes sense. Let's continue.
I close my eyes, I can see Christie reaching her hand out to me while I'm driving, and the blood just keep coming out of her mouth. And that, maybe it'll fade too with time, but I don't think so. That haunts me the most.
Interesting still, she's talking about a very gruesome portion of the story, and it's not reflecting on her face. It's not reflecting even in the micro movements of her face, the subconscious, uncontrollable ones. They're not flashing up in any way. There's no movement in her eyebrows. She has done some blinking in there, but none of them are around specific areas that we could see as a possible relation to that. We do see a smile on her face, a small smile on the lower portion of her face, and that is an interesting aspect. I'll talk about it in a second.
But what if Downs is
Creepy, right? Just creepy. That specific recollection, and then she has that smile afterwards. That smile of contempt. She feels in control, and that's part of it. I feel like this is part of it. Her desire for attention, her need for control, to want to be able to manipulate people, to feel certain ways, to be able to get that reciprocated attention back, and so on and so forth. I feel like that's her. I feel like that's who she is. Let's talk about that in a sec.
fourth child, the baby about to be born?
I'd like to see him try to take this baby from me. And how? I got pregnant because...
So now we could see that she does have the ability to emote with her eyes. You could see the smile lightly reaching her eyes, which is an inappropriate time to be smiling in regards to somebody wanting to take the new baby away, in that she possibly tried to kill her other 3 succeeding ones. That's not the time to smile and laugh and make a joke about it, and a genuine indicator of actual happiness. A smile reaching her eyes. Very interesting and unsettling.
I miss Christie, and I miss Danny, and I miss Cheryl so much.
Ooh, I miss Christie, and you could see a little bit of action through this area here. That small action, though it was hard to see in the actual mouth, that action there could be an indicator of fear. I miss Christie, and then she does a small, teeny, tiny mini expression / micro expression of fear. I miss Christie, E. What's that? Ooh, what's that fear sign for? Could be an indicator that she does not believe that she misses Christie, aka she doesn't miss Christie. I hope that makes sense.
I'm never going to see Cheryl on Earth again. And you can't...
Talking about her daughter, big smile, never going to see her on Earth again. Big smile, looks away, doesn't seem bothered by the fact she will never see her daughter again. Doesn't seem bothered at all. Even to a subconscious level, doesn't seem bothered.
Replace children, but you can replace the effect that they give you. And they give me love, they give me satisfaction, they give me stability, they give me a reason to live and a reason to be happy, and that's gone. They took it from me. But children are so easy to conceive.
I hate that last line. I hate it. I genuinely hate it. So during that time, she has that continual smile. Is this duping delight? Possibly. Is this contempt? Possibly. Is it likely a combination of a bunch of different emotions? Almost certainly. But it is uncharacteristic, and it is desynchronized from the emotional state that she's conveying. That's what people are noticing, is that she does not show the emotion that she's trying to talk about. The emotions that she's showing are fully desynchronized. She has not shown pain at a single moment throughout the entirety of all of the footage that I could track down. Not a single seepage of genuine pain. And this was characterized by all the professionals that observed her before I even decided to make this video. all of them noticed that she did not show suffering, anguish, pain in any form. Even at the hospital itself, right after the event, she was cool and collected and looked overall fine. Very, very odd. So non-verbally speaking, we saw so many aspects of desynchronization that it would be impossible to ignore. Had I been a consultant with that case specifically, we would have been able to spend more time just pushing in those weak areas, those questionable areas that even you and I picked up on today, to be able to get to that truth a little bit faster. That being said, obviously, she's still in prison where she needs to be, so they got to it. They got to it just fine. I think body language could have helped during that time. Wasn't as well known during that time, but it could have helped. Now, psychologically speaking, there were a whole variety of diagnoses on her from both sides of the argument for her being innocent, her being guilty, blah, 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 blah. One that seemed to be very common is that she was overtly narcissistic and possibly a sociopath. Possibly. Those were the ones that were most common throughout that, which both of those would make sense. 100%. In the narcissism side of things, the desire for attention, the need for manipulation and control in a person's life, and that being the driving force, even at the very end, talking about her poor kids and her being like, children are just, they give me stuff. They give me attention, they give me love, they give me that and this and all this, and they're just so easy to create. It's so easy to just go and make a child to give you stuff. That's such a narcissistic point of view. Extremely and overtly so. Very strange, very upsetting. So, combining the narcissistic, possible sociopathic tendencies that she has and all of the nonverbal communication that we were able to gather here, it becomes quite clear. Maybe not 100%, but I would be in the 90 to 95% certainty that she is guilty of the crime she's speaking of. This was me walking in without any information, which I can say that because while I was studying for this, that's what I walked into. I had no idea who Diane Downs was. I had never heard the name. But walking into it and seeing these interviews right off the bat, it was clear. And I hope that this video could help you understand that as well. Perhaps you didn't know who Diane Downs was, so you got to see that first initial clip and be extremely unsettled all the way to your core. But naturally so, and not trying to put on some sort of fake, I've never seen this before. So I hope that experience was good for you. If you liked this style of video, let me know by, commenting. It would be a really great way. Comment in the section below if you like this style of video. If there is another case or drama or anything that you would like me to do a read on, both in this style or my other style, the more long, so on and so forth style, leave those in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on the bell notification if you want to see live streams that pop up now and again, or if you just want to turn on the bell. Cool. This video is partnered with, as always, the EIA, the Emotional Intelligence Academy, based out of the Manchester Metropolitan University over in the UK. It's where I am taking my master's class to be able to have a piece of paper that says I know what I'm doing here. And you can do the same. But what is cool about this is that now, if you go to their site and sign up for literally any course, including They did this. I was so happy that they did this. They opened it up for the master's degree as well. So if you have your bachelor's degree and you would like to be able to pursue a master's in science with nonverbal communication as the focus, you can do that and get 10% off using the code OBSERVE at checkout. 10% off of an actual accredited college tuition degree. Fantastic. I am so proud of this partnership. I've been working for years to get this to you, so I hope you're able to appreciate it. There are some other ones, some other courses on there as well. I do suggest you check them all out, and you won't regret it. It's the leading university in the world, one of the only ones that offer this degree. They have worked with thousands of professionals in hundreds of professional settings. Some of the world's leading researchers are involved in this college, and because of this channel, we're able to get you a discount to learn from them. It's a very, very good opportunity. So I will shamelessly push that in every video I can. So keep that in mind, and then all the other stuff. But you know what? But without further ado, that's all that I've got for today. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome, as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys. Woof. Long one. Cool.